Check 1 2, check 1 2. We're going to go live here. Welcome everybody. Thank you for hanging out. This is our office hours live stream every Wednesday. We were doing this on Zoom, but as brilliant as I am constantly getting Zoom bombed, we're going to move it over to YouTube and do it this way. So if you have any questions about MoGraph Mentor, about the mentoring, about the classes, please feel free to drop any questions within the chat. And would love to talk about any of that. But each week we've been hanging out on Wednesdays to just make art, talk about what's up, Naga? Welcome. So great. Thank you for being here. And, you know, the last couple of weeks I've been doing like random Adobe Animate kind of overviews, various, observational drawing and painting, trying to get better with illustration, all that kind of thing. So today I am in the middle of a project that I need to really make a lot of progress on over the next couple of weeks. And so I think this is a good, I need to be spending the time to design this artwork. And just about a day ago, I did the storyboarding. So I want to talk a little bit about my storyboarding approach and the way that I like to go about it. And the document that you're looking at here in my Photoshop, which I did in Photoshop, so someone asked, do you have storyboard tutorials on your site? We don't, but I'm going to give you the storyboard tutorial right now if you're interested. Now, I call these a one-pager, right? If I need to do a kind of explainer film, which I do for a website that I am a partner in called Motion Sound, where we sell sound effects. We've spent the last year and a half making this search tool and adding, 8,000 sounds. And we've done all this work, and now we need to communicate about it and make a little kind of brand film for the new launch of the website. And so my role on the team is to do that kind of marketing stuff. So to start, I like to do a one-pager. And in my view, I can do two main things. Storyboarding really rests on, what up, Roach? Thanks for being here, buddy. Storyboarding is really two steps. One is story beats. So that's what I put up here in the top of my document, is this little just black area here where, first of all, I'm making notes. So I talk to my partners in the project and we're discussing, okay, what is the main value here? What's the main value of the product? What are the main themes that need to be touched on in the film? And so, you're seeing my really rough notes here, and it's like, okay, the first value prop's obviously the sounds. So all right, you need sound effects if you want to do a bunch of sound design, so you can use them, you can design cool stuff, and you can really share that with people. And then the second big value point is the visual search tool, where, you're going to be able to look at icons and be like, oh, I need a whoosh. So you click on the icon and it loads the whooshes, and then you start filtering and find the perfect sound. So that is basically the value prop of the product. And so, right, storyboarding for me is two things, especially for this kind of 2D explainer stuff. Number one is the story beats. So, I feel like if I can't quickly articulate the main story beats in a couple of sketches, then I'm not really ready to storyboard fully, right? Storyboarding comes to articulate story beats. So the first question is okay, what are the story beats? Well, I know what my main value props are. So right off the bat, the sounds are the main thing. So the first story beat is, okay, talk about the sounds. Hey, sounds are cool. You need sounds. The second story beat is, well, you can use those sounds in your own work to make cool stuff, to design your own work. So you end up with a video that has sound effects that you wouldn't have had previously. So that's kind of the main story beat there. Then the next big story beat is this idea of the visual search tool. And just to give you a little bit of context for what I mean by that, let me just quickly preview the website here. This is the website. So if I come to open, it's actually going to launch the app that's still in its staging ground. And this is what we mean by visual search tool, where you're like, all right, I need a bounce. So I click on bounce and it preloads the bounce into the search engine. And then I go through and do all this kind of filtering where I'm like, the intensity, the pitch, the direction, all that kind of cool stuff. So here I'm just thinking that the story beat is essentially I need to touch on the fact that that stuff exists. Now, the big reason we built the visual search tool is because when you're sound designing for really abstract shapes, it's really hard. It's not a bounce. It's not something that's really concrete where you're thinking, oh, it's just a ball bounce. That's really simple. If it's a bunch of weird morphing, nondescript stuff, how do you do that? And so one of the big reasons we decided this search tool was even basically necessary is because, once you create all of these whooshes, let's say, so if I come into whooshes, right, there's 1,600 whooshes. Oops. Let's make sure that's loaded in correctly. This is still in the beta. It's like, how do you find exactly what you need when it's like a really abstract sound? How do you describe a right type of whoosh? And that's where we landed on like intensity, pitch, direction, all that kind of thing. But all that just to say, one of the big problems we're trying to solve is like, how do you get abstract sound designs easier and faster? So that's a big story beat. And then that's really it. So those are my main story beats. So when I'm doing the one pager, it's like, all right, what's the main value prop? What are the story beats I need to hit? Then I can really start dreaming and thinking about how's this going to look within the actual sequences. So here, and this is my first draft of the boards, and I sent it to my partners, and we're going to work on it perhaps and maybe make some tweaks. But right off the bat, I'm going to start with the logo of the company, the Motion Sound logo. I imagine, I'm putting a couple of I like to add these arrows in if I have a clear sense of like how the animation could work. So I'm starting to put basic animation notes in here. And I wasn't super consistent. I decided after I was using this green line that it obscured what was going on. So it probably is better to like use two different colors. And I keep it really simple. I paint all of this basically on one or two layers. I'm not trying to make this like a fancy document. I just want to get these ideas out of my head and for the partners to see. So first concept, right? The logo kind of comes in, this nice spin, this really graphical, desktop mouse icon's going to come in, click. We're going to see a reaction to this click. I'm a big action reaction guy. That's what I really love to hit on. So it's like, just give me an action and then a reaction, right? So I'm going to go action reaction on the logo. There's like a click. They kind of go out, they expand out, and then they come back into the middle for a classic MoGraph explosion, where then we're in this giant world where there's like a million sound effects everywhere, that kind of classic, like, oh, there's so many, right? Because we want to really show people like, hey, 8,000-9,000 sounds. There's really a whole universe of sound. So that really explodes out of the logo. But then the camera, as that explosion starts to settle, the camera is going to really focus in on a single sound effect that I'm thinking it would be cool to represent with a faux 3D. So a kind of, whether I'll just do that completely with the art, or whether I'm going to rig up, nice 3D rectangles inside of After Effects. We'll see what the artwork looks like. But basically just hit this main moment. All right, you're looking for the sounds. That's the main product here. So let's get a nice glamour shot of the product. Then we get into using the product. And the reason I like this 3D concept here, I want to see this sound effect rotate and turn, and then this whole next scene is going to kind of rotate in. And so I want to use the motion of this main thing and the set that I'm about to bring in the next part of the sequence and really kind of mesh those together in an interesting way. And so here I thought it would be cool to design basically a weird 3D, 2.5D version of like Adobe Audition or some kind of nondescript audio editing software where you're clearly like sound designing to a piece of animation. So I'll need to make like a little looping animation in here. And then we'll watch this nice 3D brick come and just set itself down in this timeline. And, I don't know if it's fully articulated. This is supposed to be the timeline here. And so you'll like see this play. You'll just kind of see this like looping play. And these should be like your effects panels over here and whatever else over here. So, kind of designing a faux interface could be a cool way to go about it there. Then, right, the main story beat is like, all right, you can use the sounds, but that's really only important to the end user if you frame it around, like, then you have cool stuff to share. So we see this, again, I used the wrong color here. We see this same kind of piece of artwork come in and click a button that says render. And then we are going to watch this transform. I'll probably just wipe away most of these elements and go ahead and create an alt video player kind of situation. And then come back here where it's like, okay, the final product of having the sounds is to have a video that you can share. So we'll have like little likes. It's a bit cliche. It's not a great idea, I know. But my brain immediately went to like, all right, thumbs up and hearts, floating hearts, and the classic Facebook kind of thing, as well as like sound emanating from this video clip. So this is supposed to be, you know, kind of like a social video. I need to make sure that reads correctly. Now, the next big problem in the story beat is that when you have something simple, it's easy to find a sound effect. When you have something abstract, it becomes really difficult. So that's a big part of the film, is we need this abstract thing. So my thought here is, all right, we have this video clip. Let's go ahead and push in. So that's articulated here with the red arrows. Let's go ahead and do a push and let this thing take over the screen. Now, I thought it would be cool if this little element started emanating really faint lines to basically infer that it is like a sound effect, like there's sound coming from it. We'll see if that's a good idea or not. But basically, you can kind of see this sequence if you look at this row here. I'm basically just thinking we're going to zoom in. That main shape is going to start to do a kind of classic wipe animation, and then that sphere is going to pull the center part out and then rotate around into this fluid shape that I'll do kind of in Adobe Animate. And so that's what I'm trying to articulate here for myself later, is like this piece. And it's kind of tricky, so I did want to draw 4 or 5 drawings to really think through how that might work. But I think I've got a pretty clear idea where this main base element is going to end up off screen left, top left, but really your eye is going to fit right here in the middle. So I really just need to make a really interesting animation right here in the center, something really fluidy, and then get a nice little flowing path kind of animation, where then the next sequence in the film is basically like this abstract shape is just going to go into a holding pattern, screen left here, this third left of the screen, while we get into some of this like VO value prop stuff where it's like, you know, more organic and abstract. We built a visual search tool to find the perfect sound effects. So all these visual search boxes start to animate in, and then we're going to see the mouse kind of click around, find the perfect sound effect, do the filtering. So again, that's like the other big value prop we need to show. Like, all right, then you filter, and then hooray, there's one sound effect left. You found the perfect sound. And so from there, the idea was this element here somehow, and I didn't articulate it super well, like all that screen infographic-y stuff and that sound effect are going to merge together and turn back into a single sound effect that takes us back to do what you would think of as a callback. Like, let's start the film where we end the film, back in this universe of sounds that are all going to come collapsing towards the center. You know, that classic, you know, lines all coming towards the center, and then right back into the motion sound logo. So that is the storyboarding. I call this a one sheet, a one pager. And I think you could basically do this every time, right? Just think of your story, like think of your key points, whatever you need to outline, think of your story beats, and then do your best to come up with ideas. Now, even as I go through this, I definitely think there's some better ideas. I think some of these sequences could be elevated, and this is obviously going to be very short. I've only got a couple of weeks to do it, so it's important that I be thinking really simply, right? I'm not going to be able to have time to do things that are necessarily too complex. So with that storyboard in mind, the next thing I would do is actually just jump into Adobe Illustrator and maybe just start laying out some style frames. I think that's a next good step, and I'm going to jump into that here. So I've created an Illustrator document just with 4 storyboards, because that feels like a nice place to start. Now, before I really start laying out shapes and everything, I'm going to just really roughly grab some screenshots. Let me come back to the main staging for the new platform. And what I like to do is grab some screenshots, right? You know, if you have a brand where they're giving you a brand guide, you should be able to get this anyway. We don't have a brand guide, so I'm just going to mine some colors off here, right? All this color in here is really interesting. But really the main kind of branding, everything is dark, and we've got these faint purples, and we've got this kind of purple gradient, which I think is really interesting too. But I probably also want to grab some secondary colors as well. So if I go ahead and maybe grab a screenshot of that. This is kind of interesting with all these purple colors here. And there's really two ways to go about the design process at this point. I can either, if I feel confident enough that there's like definitely a color palette that's gonna work, then I can go ahead and immediately just start working in that color palette, or I can start designing frames in grayscale, which is probably preferable, and making my illustrations and my designs look good in black and white first before I get bogged down in color. But from here, I'd like to take these screenshots, and just for the sake of consistency, I probably need to mine out some more specific hex codes. And so if I just make a shape and then do some color picking, I can kind of quickly rebuild it. What I don't want to be doing is recolor picking off of this document over and over and over. I want to like kind of dial in, all right, this is the shade of this purple and this is the shade of this purple. And let's see, is there a third medium tone in there? Okay, so like that's kind of interesting there. I'll go ahead and grab some other ones, and I know these will be secondary colors, so just for my own brain power here, I'm going to make all of these a little bit smaller. But I do think that pink is probably very likely to work in interesting ways. And since we have purple, it's always advisable to go to the other side of the color wheel and think complements. And these are very pale purples. And so that makes me think that pale greens are going to work probably really well. And it makes me, this lime green here is likely to work very well. And even this yellow, this color's probably likely to work very decently. A lot of these oranges look a little bit faded. Man, I gotta stop doing that. These blues are probably a bit redundant, so I would maybe leave some of that. So maybe my first color palette is here. Now, I do need, color context is really important, because that purple is gonna look one way against white, it's going to feel really light, or, versus something like black, where, let's see, objects, arrange, send to back, against black, it's going to look a kind of specific way, versus on white. And I think it's probably an easy call that this is going to be in a kind of darker space, but I also typically like it when explainer videos and 2D films invert the whole color scheme at certain points in the film. To me, that always feels like you're going on more of a journey, and it's like kind of interesting, and it makes it feel like you're going into different spaces and kind of traveling. So I don't think it's out of the question that part of the film might end up in this lighter palette, but it seems a little bit less likely there. So I'm going to Command G those references and group them, and go ahead and throw those on a ref layer, and then I'll call this first layer just my color 01. And I think we're past needing to see that reference, but I'll just leave it in the scene for now, because I'm not sharing this document with anybody else. And I'll kind of move this off to the side. I think this is basically going to be the main kind of thing here. Now, I do want to make sure that I create a new layer as I start to design maybe this first shot. And I'm just going to pull this really dark value up to this new layer. And again, I think it does make sense to start in the grayscale. I think like the main concern is that the shot reads and is interesting and has enough contrast to be attractive. And if it looks good in black and white, it's definitely going to look super sexy in color. So starting in the grayscale is definitely a decent place to start. Now, very quickly, the last thing I would do is go ahead and pull my little one-pager storyboard into Illustrator as well, just for some reference here to think about what I was kind of thinking of. And I think the best place to start here is this sound effect shot. So let's just go ahead and start throwing some shapes in here. And I'll just color pick this lighter value and hit M for the rectangle tool. And we'll start to think about this very first shots. So, you know, the difference between art direction and the final actual animation production, the real main difference will be, and this is why, you know, some animation testing is always in order too, is I could sit here and design a really nice faux 3D look, which is really important to do to just establish art direction. But if we're really going to need to rebuild those in After Effects, then it's really more important that it just look really good here. And I'll know that I'm probably just going to have more work in terms of recreating it. So the little perspective I have on it, I can just hit Command-C, Command-F on this top shape. Actually go into that base shape. And let me actually pull my ref out of this folder here. I'm going to lock down the two base shapes, hit A to select these 2 points, and go ahead and drag this piece over. Now I do have some perspective on there, so there is a horizon line, and I drew the horizon line right down the center. So I can just shift tab down from that side there, maybe just 3, or shift up arrow and down arrow. So that places my horizon line right in the middle, so it's very like, you know, presenting itself to the camera. And of course, we're going to need some different values. So it actually reads like a 3D object. In my original storyboard, I wanted it to feel like glossy and sexy. So that's kind of the big design challenge here. How am I going to use these shapes to get to a look that is a bit more interesting? I don't want it to feel too thick. I do want it to feel pretty glossy. Before I think about the rendering effects, though, I just want to make sure everything is reading in a kind of appropriate way. And the next big thing is get represented. If I actually just come in here, they basically represented from a baseline, and then they're just lines. So I should probably do my best to kind of mimic that design. A good way to go about this would be just to probably use the pen tool, and I'll lock down even this other background layer, and I'll just put one, and I don't know if it should go all the way to the bottom because this is you know, for film purposes. So I'm gonna hit escape there on that line. So I have a first stroke way too small. Let's go ahead and stroke this line a bit. And I don't need a fill, so I'm going to turn that off. I've got this really black stroke that might be a little too dark in terms of values. So I may just pull back ever so slightly on that. Shoot. Stream may be in and out a little bit. I really apologize if the stream goes down at any point. I'm just going to try to keep flowing here. So from this point, I need my actual stroke window because I kind of want to work with this element here before I go ahead and just quickly duplicate and alter this a bit. So the stroke window, I definitely think I want these rounded shapes. I think that's probably going to work a little bit better. I think that's pretty okay then. And the best way to go about this may just be alt dragging enough duplicates. And if I hold shift, it's going to go a lot faster. I'll just alt drag. And I don't need to worry, obviously, too much about the in-between spacing. We'll go ahead and use our alignment panel very soon to get all that. And I'll pull the alignment panel out here because we're definitely going to need that for this portion. And this will be one of my main variations. If I just alt and then use the side arrow, it will drag out a duplicate. And you know, waveforms on sound effects are always very dramatic. They always like spike and then kind of go back down to 0. So I think we're probably going to get away with a lot of this kind of thing here. But obviously this needs to be a little bit more kind of smoothed. And we could treat this one and this is, you know, slow part of the process early on, but once I have a first one with a bunch of lines, I think it's going to be a lot easier to do future ones. So I will quickly align that up just before I go too far. Oh man, I moved that down 1 pixel. I am a dum-dum. There we go. Alt, click another version. Let's see, it's basically going to turn into a dot, which is actually kind of cool. So, like, that's kind of interesting. I can alt drag one here, and let's say, all right, let's start ramping back up into like another part of this sound effect. With that. And I think it probably looks wrong if it's too gradiated. It needs to be a bit more sudden, perhaps. So actually move this down. So if anybody has any questions about MoGraph Mentor, about storyboarding, about our upcoming mentorships, anything like that, you know, we're trying to do this open office hours session every Wednesday to went down there. It's a good way to lose everybody. But I was saying, if you have any questions about MoGraph Mentor, we're trying to do these. Hey, Paige? Paige? Hey, Paige? Okay. Sorry, everybody.